Hello students, welcome to BYJU'S IAS. In today's live session, let's have a discussion on certain very important economy related events that have taken place from 4th of September to 10th of September 2021. The first article that I want to discuss is the concept of account aggregators, or in the short AA. Now some of the newspapers had carried a lot of information related to this, and some newspapers did not carry anything related to concept of a AA. Now for UPSC exams, this becomes very important. Why? Let's try and understand the concept now. AA in simple terms are nothing but NBFCs which are given the license to provide the service of account aggregation by Reserve Bank of India. This is the first point. Now you will simply ask me a question, sir, what do you mean by account aggregation here? Right now, as an investor, I have made investment in a different instruments in the market. For example, I would have kept certain amount that I have earned in the form of a bank deposit, let's say FD or savings bank account. Now this particular information is lying with a particular bank. Now imagine, in addition to this, I have also made investment in mutual funds, but this investment information is lying with a mutual fund company. In addition to this, if I have made investment in an insurance product, again related to this, the information is lying with this particular insurance company. In essence, what I am trying to say here is the investment, the information related to these particular investments are dispersed, are spread like this throughout the financial system. Now imagine I will have a bank account in one bank XYZ, but I will apply for a loan in some other bank, let's say ABC. Now once I apply for a loan, this particular bank ABC would want all the financial related information with respect to the bank account that I have. For example, they will ask me to give me data related to last 3 months statements. They will ask me to provide all the investment data that I have done in the market, so that they will have sufficient amount of information to decide whether to give me a loan or not. And in this particular situation, what will happen is, as an investor, I will have to run from one institution to another institution to collect the data. I will have to take the printout, go to this particular bank ABC, submit the document. The manager looks at the document and says that, yes, you have brought the document, but these are not notarized. There is no stamp of this particular respective issuing authority. Again, I will have to run back to these institutions to get them notarized. So there is a lot of issue with respect to collection of the financial related data here. So what has been proposed very recently, and around 8 of the banks in case of India have joined, is the concept of account aggregator network. The discussion related to AA started back in the year 2016. There is one authority in case of India called as FSDC, Financial Sector Development Council. FSDC is headed by the Finance Minister, and it has all these particular regulatory bodies as the members. For example, in case of FSDC, RBI is a member, IRDA, Insurance Regulatory Development Authority, is a member, SEBI is a member, PFRDA, Pension Fund Regulatory Development Authority, is a member of FSDC. So back in the 2016, they started deliberating on this particular concept of account aggregators, and very recently the idea for AA has become operational. And as such, already some of the banks such as IndusInd Bank, right, Kotak Mahindra, etc. were already using the concept of account aggregators in case of different types of products, right, they were actually offering to the customers. Now what is the idea of an account aggregator? Right, let's go back to the example that I have taken. I have invested in a bank, I have kept certain deposits, I have also invested in a mutual fund, I have also invested in an insurance product. All this financial related data, all this particular financial investment related data will be compiled in a single system, which is basically referred as a concept of an account aggregator. Now what will happen is, let's continue the same example. I will go to bank ABC, apply for a loan. Is it okay? I will go to bank ABC and apply for a loan. Now understand the system, how the account aggregator system will function. In account aggregator system, there are 3 pillars, or there are 3 very important participants. One, as usual, there are account aggregators, these are NBFCs, which are given the license by RBI. Second, there is a financial information user. FIU refers to financial information user. These could be banks or non-banks, which wants to collect the financial related data of a particular consumer or let's say a customer. In addition to this, there is a financial information provider, FIP, which is also a bank or a non-bank. So please don't get confused here. Banks and non-banks will act as a dual roles, or they will have a dual role here. They will act as a FIUs, financial information user, and they will also act as a financial information provider. For example, in this case, ABC is a bank which is asking for information. It will collect information, hence, right, basically it becomes a financial information user. And after it collects information, it will decide whether to give a loan to me or not. On the other hand, another bank where I have kept the deposits, this particular insurance company where I have made investment, or the mutual fund company where again I have made investment, will become the financial information providers. So there are three entities, or there are three stakeholders, or the three pillars within the concept of account aggregation. One is account aggregators, second one is financial information users, and financial information providers. Now how the system will work? Let's start with an example. I will approach this particular bank, a customer will approach a financial information user and let's say will ask for a loan. Now what this particular FIU, financial information user, will do, it will give basically a information request to account aggregator, AA, account aggregator. They will send the information request to AA. Now the AA, before sending the request to financial information provider, will send a consent request to the customer. Is it okay? It is customer consent oriented. Means what? As a customer, I can always control what kind of a information, what duration for this particular information. So what information and what is the duration of the information to be provided to financial information user. For example, in this particular case, I can restrict, let's say, last 3 years financial data related to my account to be given to this particular FIU, that is a bank here. So have a look at this. FIU will submit a request for data to account aggregator. Account aggregator will send a consent request to the customer. Only after the customer consent is provided, the data will be collected from financial information provider and transferred to financial information user. At no point of time, understand this very carefully, at no point of time the AA, account aggregator, will have the data that is being transferred. That is, the data whichever is transferred, it is in encrypted form. I repeat, the data that is being provided, that is transferred. Let's assume I am the customer, my financial related data which is being transferred to FIU will be always in an encrypted form. AA will not be allowed to open the encryption, will not be allowed to read the data. It will simply collect and transfer. That's it. Second point, AA will not be allowed to sell the data to anyone else. Right? Once they have collected data, given it to FIU, they are not allowed to store this particular data. They are not allowed to sell this particular data. And only the data regarding which the consent has been sought from the customer, only that particular data shall be provided to FIU. And that is how the system of account aggregators is expected to function. Now what is the advantage? What are we trying to achieve here? First, very important benefit, this particular customer need not have to run from one bank to another bank, stand in line, collect the data, that is the photocopy of his own account information. Nor is he required to log on to his banking account, that is internet banking account, get the data from the internet banking account, not required now. Right? Once you become a customer, please understand the system here. Once you become a customer, that is a registered person under the account aggregators, you will also have to provide, that is a link all the financial related data that you have, right, under your investments. For example, you have made investments in a bank, please relate that particular account with account aggregator system. You have invested in a mutual fund, link that also. You have invested, let's say, in insurance fund, link that also. So one, customer has to be registered. Second, right, customer can decide what kind of a data can be shared and what duration for this particular data can be provided access to this particular FIU. So we are trying to protect the privacy of the customer here. And moreover, already I have mentioned this, the AA will not be allowed to store the information of the customer, will not be allowed to sell the information of the customer to anyone. So privacy of the customer is protected. Second, it will make it much easier for the customer to provide this particular financial related data whenever it is requested, rather than running from bank to bank, getting the data notarized, right? All of these particular issues will be addressed. On the other hand, for a bank for a bank or other financial institution, what is the benefit here? Earlier, there was always a concern for the bank whether the data that is provided, that is a photocopy that is being provided by the customer, whether it is a genuine or a counterfeit or a fake data that is being provided. Again, for that particular purpose, they used to go for a counter checking of this particular data. For example, imagine you applied for a loan in case of ABC Bank. ABC Bank will ask you, right, the monthly salary slip of let's say last 6 months. You will submit the bank data. Now, how will the bank ABC come to know the data that you have submitted is a genuine one? So they will send someone to respective bank where you have a bank account to counter check whether you have actually received this much amount of salary or not. So that requirement will be not now, right? That requirement will not be useful anymore. Why? Here is a financial institution which is registered, which has been given license by RBI. This is going to collect the data directly from the financial information provider and transfer it to FIU. So there is a question of a counterfeit data or a fake data, right? So there is a genuineness that is attached to this particular data. Second, rather than banks providing the printouts of all of this, now everything is being transferred in a digital form. So cost related to transfer of information is also expected to come down. Right? So these are some of the advantages that have been associated with the bank. And most importantly, follow this very carefully. Most importantly, now this particular data can be utilized by the bank to assess whether the borrower is a genuine borrower, whether he is a credit worthy borrower, whether it is a company such as MSME. The banks will come to know whether they are going to receive the amount in the next coming months based on the last pattern or the pattern of data, let's say for last 1 year. The information can be used as a collateral to get the access to small value loans, especially for MSMEs now. That is the advantage that is associated with the concept of account aggregators. So this is the total discussion here. Please be very, very careful. This could be asked in the UPSC prelims or even in the mains. Now, based on this particular discussion, I have given a question here. Consider the following statements regarding account aggregators. For setting up AA, that is account aggregator, the entity has to get a license from SEBI. Statement is wrong. The entity has to get the license from Reserve Bank of India. That is the first statement which is wrong. Second one, account aggregators can store the information of the customers for a maximum period of 3 months. Statement 2 is also wrong. Why? Please remember this. AAs cannot store the data of the customers. At no point of time they will be allowed to store. They can simply collect and transfer. That's it. So even the second statement is wrong. Right option is option D, neither 1 nor 2. Let's go to the next article. Ford announces that it will exit India, not exist, exit India. Now what are the important points here? Let's try and understand. Ford is one of the very important foreign manufacturers of automobiles which was present in India. Now I am using the term very important for a simple reason. One, it is one of the biggest manufacturers in the global market. But in case of India, it has a very small market share. Only around 1.4% of the market share is attributed to this particular company. But it is important for a simple reason. This particular company was present in India even before independence. And post independence, again it re-entered, underline the term, again it re-entered post LPG reforms. That is the 1991 reforms of liberalization, privatization and globalization. Two important companies which entered into India at this particular point of time, again in automobiles, is one Ford company and the second one is Hyundai company. And today Hyundai along with the Suzuki company owns around 60% or over 60% of the market share, whereas the Ford company had only around 1.4% of the market share. Now what is the announcement done here? Please be very, very careful. Ford company has announced that it will be shutting down the manufacturing activities in India. I'll repeat the statement here. It will be shutting down the manufacturing activities in case of India. Currently, Ford has two manufacturing units. One is in Sanand, that is in Gujarat, and the second one is in Chennai, nearby Chennai in Tamil Nadu. And both of these particular manufacturing plants will be shut down and manufacturing activities of this particular company will be seized. Now, in addition to this, you will have to remember this. When I said that Ford will exit from India, it is not going to exit completely from India. Only the manufacturing activity will be seized, and rest of the activities such as importing certain global brands of a Ford company and selling them in India will continue. I can understand this. they will continue to market and sell their global brands within the Indian market, only they are going to shut down the manufacturing activity in India. Now, if you ask me, sir, why the company decided to shut down? Because on one side, Government of India is promoting manufacturing, but on the other side, we are seeing these kind of activities or these kinds of announcements. Why? Simple reason. One, the company says, although it invested, right, although it has invested and tried to increase its market share, increase its competitiveness in the domestic market by acquiring larger market share, that has not happened. Right, initially it made an investment in this particular plant in Tamil Nadu. Later in 2011, they also made investment in Sanand, Gujarat to increase the overall production of the Ford motor cars as such. But please understand, despite making higher investment, in the last 1 decade, it has accrued losses of over $2 billion. In the last 1 decade, it has accrued, it has basically incurred the overall operational losses of more than $2 billion. And the recent discussion that has been given with respect to Ford company is, they want to focus on those particular markets where their market share is very high, their revenue generation is very high, and they do not want to invest in the markets where they are having marginal market share. Best example for this is, they have announced shutting down manufacturing in case of India, and earlier this year they even announced that they will be shutting down manufacturing even in the country Brazil. That is another very important point here. Third very important point, not just this particular Ford company, but other foreign companies earlier have stated that the tax rates which are imposed by the government on the sales of these particular cars is on a higher side, right? The tax rate such as GST rate of 28% is imposed. Ford company has cited this as a problem. Earlier, Toyota company also cited this as a problem. Earlier, right, the companies such as Harley Davidson, which is not involved in car manufacturing, but it is in automobile sector, it announced that the taxation or the tariff rates which are imposed by the government are very high, so we are going to exit India. And before that, there was one more company, that is the GM company, right, General Motors company, again American company, which wanted to invest or which had invested in India, citing certain issues, has withdrawn completely from India. So please understand, in the last couple of years, there has been a trend, again there has been a trend wherein more and more automobile companies, especially associated with the US market, are withdrawing their operations from India. So the concern that has been raised with respect to this is, on one side Government of India says we want to promote manufacturing, and on the other hand there are international companies which are citing certain issues with respect to the policies here, with respect to the market share here, and they are withdrawing their operation. And the third issue, right, or fourth to be more precise, why this particular company decided to quit was, earlier the market share of the Ford company was slightly higher. For example, in August 2020, the market share of this particular Ford company was 1.9%, and by August of this year it has further fallen down, it has slid down to 1.4%. Now what is the reason here? For many of the car buyers in case of India, understand this very carefully, they are focused on two things. One, what is the cost of this particular car, right, cost to benefit ratio, that is basically what is the cost of this particular car today when I buy it, and whether in the future it will have a resale value or not. I can understand this. If I invest this particular amount in purchasing a car, I will use it, let's say, for 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever the number of years. After that, will I get any amount of resale value on this particular car or not? And second one is with respect to fuel efficiency. Second one is with respect to fuel efficiency, and Ford Motors or Ford company's cars are more associated with one, higher cost. Second, they are associated with engine powers. And in a market such as, let's say, USA, where it is very dominant, right, this particular company is very dominant in this particular market, there is always a focus on the power or the engine of the power. What is the torque, how much power this particular engine can generate, rather than the utility of the vehicle. Whereas in a country such as India, which is very much price conscious economy, or the consumers are very much price conscious, majority of the cars which are purchased are dominated by low cost companies, or the low cost cars which are manufactured, let's say, by companies such as Hyundai and companies such as Maruti Suzuki, which have focused more on the cost of the products rather than providing, let's say, luxurious products as such. That is a precise reason more than 60% of the cars which are sold in India are accounted by these two companies itself. Again, the statement doesn't mean that Indians don't focus on luxury, but majority of the households focus on the cost, That is, how much do I spend today and what is the resale value tomorrow. And the second one is, what is the efficiency of the engine rather than power of the engine as such. Done. So these are some of the issues citing which the company has exited India. Now, from the context of this particular article, what can you expect in UPSC? What can you expect? One, will it have an impact on the investor sentiment in India? That you will have to wait and see. Government of India says no, it will not have any impact on the investor sentiment. So one is the issue of impact on the investor sentiment. That is, whether the other investors will be worried about investing more in India or investing for the first time in case of India. That is one question that definitely will be discussed now. Second issue will be, have a look at this. Second issue with respect to this is the idea of the protection of the franchises. Protection of franchises. Now, what is this particular franchisee? The company will manufacture a car, but directly rather than selling through, let's say, the retail outlets, it will basically allow the different sellers to purchase the cars and sell them in the market. These are called as franchises. Now, as recently as 5 months before this announcement was done, franchises were registered under the company Ford. Right? It had kept on giving franchisee license to these particular franchisee investors as such. And there is a concern that more than 2,000 crore rupees worth of investment has been made by the franchisee owners. They have thousands of employments now. They have also invested a lot of money. Now, if the Ford decides to shut down manufacturing, who is going to provide right amount of enumeration or let's say right amount of compensation to these particular franchisee owners? That is one question, because please understand, in other countries such as Brazil, Russia, Mexico, China, Japan, Australia, etc., there is a Franchisee Protection Act, and in case of India we do not have this particular act. In fact, back in the year 2020, a parliamentary panel has suggested that Ministry of one of the ministries under the government should set up this particular act, but this has not been done so far. Now, how much compensation will be provided to these particular investors who are owning these particular franchises, you will have to wait and see. So these are some of the issues that are associated with this particular discussion of Ford announcing its exit from India. Let's go to the next article. Rising shipping cost or rising freight cost. And in the last 2 weeks, there has been a lot of discussion with respect to rising freight cost. Let's try and understand what is the issue here. India has set up a target of exporting merchandise worth $400 billion for the current financial year. Is it okay? For financial year 22, we have set up a very ambitious target of having a merchandise exports worth $400 billion. And these particular merchandise will have to move from India to rest of the world either through port or through airport. And most of the trade that India conducts, most of the trade, more than 90% by volume of the trade that India conducts is basically done through the port itself. And whenever you have a trade right through the port, one, you will have to have vessels, that is ships used for transportation. In addition to vessels, you will also have to have containers. Now, there is issue with both of them. First, let's start with the containers. 85% of the containers which are used in the global market are manufactured in China. And recently, because of issue with respect to lockdowns imposed because of COVID, right, because of lower production of containers, there is a shortage of containers in the global market. Is it okay? There is a shortage of containers in the global market. Now, because there is a shortage of containers on one side, and on the other side, the demand recovery is taking place in the global market. So the lockdowns which were imposed by various governments, these particular lockdowns have been withdrawn. So there is a rising demand for goods and services in the global market. So on one side, demand for these containers is rising upwards, and on the other side there is a lower production of this. There is a shortage of containers. As a result of this, cost of using these particular containers or cost of hiring these particular containers is gradually increasing. And in the last 1 year itself, it has increased by more than 300% in many of these particular cases. Now, that is one issue. And when the cost of containers starts increasing like this, that is the cost of using these particular containers starts rising upwards so steeply, obviously the cost of operations using the vessels will also start increasing. Now, this has raised alarm bells amongst the Indian exporters, because very recently the exports started reviving in case of Indian market, And the exporters, looking at the global market demand recovery, wanted to leverage, wanted to benefit out of this particular recovery. But as a blow, what has come to their surprise is these particular cost of freights have started increasing very steeply. For example, the cost of sending the freight, that is a transportation from India to, let's say, Eastern America, earlier was somewhere around $6,000 to $7,000. Okay, the east coast of America, from India to east coast of America, it cost around $6,000 to $7,000 to transport, right, one container as such. Now this has steeply increased to more than $11,000. It has increased steeply to more than $11,000. And what is the impact? Impact straightforward is, one, have a look at this very carefully, cost of transportation is going to increase. And when cost of transportation increases, obviously it will translate to higher cost for the exports. And exporters are concerned that the cost of exports might inch up by 5% to 8%, which will further make them lower competitive or lesser competitive in the international market. That is the first issue. Second issue, because there is a shortage of containers now, what is happening is, earlier it took around 45 days to transport these particular containers from one point to another point, let's say from India to rest of the world, important trades as such. Now as a result of shortage of containers, this particular time period has increased from 45 days to 75 days to 90 days in majority of the cases. So the time taken for transportation also has increased, right? And as a result of this, understand this very carefully, as a result of this, exporters will export the commodities. Once it reaches the exporter, then the payment will be done. Now the payment is getting delayed by 2 to 3 months. Is it okay? The payments are getting delayed by 2 to 3 months. And please remember this, exporters are always concerned with respect to credit. The amount of money that is available for the exporters is always short of what they actually require. So in a time period when the exporters are functioning in a shortage of the amount, shortage of the credit, the receivables are getting stuck up for 2 to 3 months, which will further put burden or pressure on the exporters as such. Now what is the way out? We have discussed the issue so far. What is the way out? The way out can be discussed under two heads, short term as well as the long term. In case of short term, please be very careful. The exporters are asking Government of India to intervene and impose certain restrictions with respect to movement or export of empty containers. I repeat, the exporters are demanding that government should intervene and impose certain restrictions with respect to export of empty containers. Now why are we exporting empty containers? Please understand this. When there is a shortage of containers in the global market, there are certain exporters from the foreign market who are pre-booking these particular containers. I can understand this, who are pre-booking these particular empty containers. And these empty containers, let's say they are sitting at Chennai port or Kolkata port, these empty containers are being transported from India to, let's say, any other country where the exporters are pre-booking these particular containers. Right, so if you transport these particular empty containers, obviously there will be further shortage of containers in India. As a result of this, Kolkata port very recently has imposed a restriction of not exporting more than 100 empty containers on a vessel. I will repeat the statement here. On a vessel which will move away from India, it will not be allowed to carry more than 100 empty containers. And the exporters are demanding that Government of India should intervene and impose same kind of restrictions among other major ports also. That is one in a short term. Second, these particular exporters are suffering because of higher freight rate. Government of India can consider providing them fiscal support for next, let's say next 6 to 7 months, right? As long as the freight rates will start cooling down in the market. That is the second option available. Third option, Government of India from 19, that is a financial year 1920, 1 year, and financial year 2021 had implemented a scheme called as a Transport and Marketing Assistance, TMA. I will discuss more on this because it is there in the PIP also. So earlier for 2 years, Government of India has implemented a scheme called as Transport and Marketing Assistance, under which part of the freight rates which were paid by the exporters were given back by the government so as to incentivize these particular exports. This can also be extended, this can be reintroduced, which Government of India has announced very recently. So government can take these particular measures in short term. What about long term? Understand this particular transport industry, that is shipping industry, accounts for value of around $60 billion annually in case of India. This export shipping industry accounts for around $60 billion annually in case of India. Out of this, only 5% is actually accounted by Shipping Corporation of India, SCI. And the government of India is of the viewpoint that because only 5% is accounted by this SCI, which is owned by us, we will not be able to control the freight rates in the market. And moreover, please understand, SCI has already been put on the block by government of India for the purpose of the sales. Second, what government of India can do is promote more and more domestic companies to enter into shipping activity, right, so that the dependence on the foreign vessels will come down. And the third reform which government of India can take is promote manufacture of containers in the domestic market, because earlier I have mentioned this, more than 85% are manufactured by China. So reduce the dependence, promote the manufacturing of containers in the domestic market itself. So these are some of the reforms that can be implemented by the government either in the short term or in the long term. Done? So this is a discussion with relation to the concept of a shipping or freight rates, which is being discussed in the last couple of weeks. Let's go to the next article, Committee of Creditors. The Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India very recently has brought out a proposal for Code of Committee of Creditors. What is being proposed? We'll have a discussion later. So understand this. What is the idea here? Generally, under the concept of IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, there is a concept of creditors, and these particular creditors are divided into two types, financial creditors and operational creditors. Now, of the two types of creditors, which are the most important type of creditors? It is a financial creditors, which will play a very important role. For example, Committee of Creditors composed of financial creditors. 66% of the financial creditors will have to approve insolvency resolution process, right? Even in case of pre-pack insolvency, again it is the financial the creditors who will play a very important role. And earlier, one of the standing committees recommended that we must be able to bring in a code for the Committee of Creditors, because they play a very important role under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. We should be able to bring in a code for these particular Committee of Creditors, and that is exactly what is being proposed by Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India. Under this, they have brought in a code, basically a set of principles which are supposed to be followed, or the guidelines which are supposed to be followed by Committee of Creditors. And once this will be implemented, what is the objective here? Once it is implemented, we are trying to ensure there is a transparency in the system. We want to instill certain amount of a discipline amongst these particular creditors, right? And we also want to ensure that whatever the timelines or time frames which are fixed under the IBC, these particular time frames will be adhered to. And this is very important for a simple reason. Under IBC, have a look at this. Under IBC, the time frame which has been fixed is currently 330 days. That is, some of the books will split it 270 plus 60 days. Earlier it was 180, then we have shifted to 270, now totally 330 days. But very recently, we celebrated 5 years of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. That is 5 years of implementation of IBC. And as per the evaluation of the cases which are there under IBC, more than 80% of the cases are consuming more than 270 days as of now. Is it okay? It has been more than 270 days in case of more than 80% of the ongoing cases where the time frame has already been surpassed. So we want to instill this kind of the discipline amongst these particular the creditors as such. So under the concept of the code, what has been proposed? First and foremost, whenever Committee of Creditors are going to get access to certain information, right? Because obviously these are part of the discussion. They are going to get access to a lot of sensitive information related to company. So whenever they will get access to this kind of a sensitive data, they are not supposed to disclose it to anyone. So confidentiality is very important. First. Second one, whenever any decision is taken by the Committee of Creditors, right, this particular decision should be taken without any fear, any favor, without any bias, without any coercion. I can understand this, because the Committee of Creditors will decide whether we want to go for insolvency resolution of a company or we want to go for a liquidation. So they should be able to take this particular decision without any bias, fear, favor, coercion, etc. Third, if the Committee of Creditors have got any kind of a conflict of interest, this conflict of interest should be should be conveyed to all the stakeholders. If they have any kind of a conflict of interest, they must come out and basically state the conflict of interest. Next, the Committee of Creditors neither directly or indirectly should not be purchasing the assets of the company which is under the IBC without disclosing it to the stakeholders. I will repeat the statement here. The Committee of Creditors should not be purchasing the assets of this particular company which is undergoing the insolvency resolution process either directly or indirectly. How can they do it indirectly? Right? Imagine, again imagine, right? I am part of a Committee of Creditor. Right? So I know that this particular company is being sold at a very cheaper rate. Right? I will tell my cousin, I will tell my relative to bid for the company who will purchase this particular company at a throwaway price. Is it possible? Definitely yes. But what this particular code says is, if either you are purchasing asset or your relative is purchasing asset, any related party is purchasing asset, please disclose it to the stakeholders in the beginning itself, so that there is absolutely no confusion, transparency will be maintained, etc. So these are some of the things which have been proposed under the code for Committee of Creditors. Again, this is just a proposal. You will have to wait and see once if it is going to be implemented, or are there going to be any changes? If yes, what changes? If no, in what form it is going to be implemented. Done. So this is a discussion related to new code for Committee of Creditors which has been proposed by IBBI. Let's go to the next article. NBFCs, non-banking financial companies. Now the reason why I have picked up this particular article is very simple. Earlier there was one of the very big NBFC in case of India by the name IL and FS, Infrastructure Leasing and Financial Services. 3 years ago there was a small issue, or there was a very big issue with respect to the operation of IL and FS, and in simple terms there was a huge scam which broke out, and as a result of this other NBFCs found it very difficult to raise money from the market. Generally, NBFCs will use different routes to collect money from the market and use it for investment or lending purposes, etc. And one favorite route for the NBFCs is to issue bonds in the market. Is it okay to issue bonds in the market, collect money and use the money for different purposes? They can use the money for investment purposes, they can use this particular money for lending purposes, etc. And because they perform these kinds of banking activities, NBFCs are also referred to as shadow banks. Remember the term here. These are also referred to as shadow banks. Now what happened was, IL and FS was one of the biggest NBFCs in India. It borrowed from the market, it defaulted on the repayment. So the market lost a lot of confidence on these particular NBFCs. Hence it became very difficult for other NBFCs to borrow from the market by issuing bonds in the market, and as a result of this, their other activities such as lending activity, investment activity were also affected. And very recently, right, that is the good news about this particular article. Very recently, the survey has found that, or the research has found that, more and more NBFCs are able to issue bonds in the market, collect the money from the market. And this is good news for a simple reason. One, there is a need for promoting lot of credit flow into the Indian market. There is a need to ensure that credit will flow to housing sector, credit will flow to automobile sector, credit will flow to rural India, credit will also flow to infrastructure investment. So in this particular scenario, rather than being only dependent on the banking sector, if these objectives can be met even with NBFCs, that is a good news for the Indian economy, which will help in increasing demand, which will also help in basically promoting more recovery or a faster recovery for Indian economy. Done. So these are some of the points related to the NBFCs able to raise money in the market by selling bonds at a lower interest rate. And in addition to this, another objective or another inference that you can derive out of this article is, when NBFCs are able to sell the bonds in the market, it essentially means the investor appetite in the market for the bonds is also increasing, which is also good news for the bond market in case of India. So these are some of the points related to this. Apart from this, different NBFCs, how much they have sold, how much they want to sell in terms of bonds, that information is given. You don't have to mug up all of this particular information, not important for UPSC. Done. Next, green hydrogen, right? Very little information is provided here. Let's focus only on that. First and foremost, this particular discussion is in the newspaper because of announcement that has been done by Reliance Industry chairman, Mr. Ambani. he has stated that by the end of this particular decade, through the investments done by the Reliance company, they will be able to produce the green hydrogen at a cost of $1 per kg. Currently, for 1 kg of a green hydrogen, it will basically cost you around $3.6 to $5.8, and the objective is to reduce it to $2 per kg, and more ambitious target will be reducing it further to $1 per kg cost of production. That is one point. In addition to this, the Reliance company also has announced that by 2035 it will be going green. Is it okay? It will be going green, and in order to promote hydrogen production in India, it will be investing more than 75,000 crore rupees. These are some of the points which have been mentioned in the discussion here. But apart from that, what you need to understand: one, India is heavily dependent on the consumption of a green hydrogen, but let's say hydrogen, and around 6 metric million ton or 6 million tons of hydrogen is consumed. But for production of this particular hydrogen, most of the raw material we actually import, right? For example, we import ammonia, we import natural gas, which is used for the production of this particular hydrogen as such. Now, Government of India is thinking of promoting, right, more and more green hydrogen production from industries, and once these particular industries, one, shift to production of green hydrogen, second, produce more and more hydrogen, this will reduce the import dependence of raw materials such as ammonia and natural gas, first one. And as the dependence on the green hydrogen, which is a fuel, will increase, the import dependence on the fossil fuels will also increase. This will provide certain benefit to current account deficit, will provide certain benefit to even the rupee depreciation. That is, it will try to control the rupee depreciation which might happen because of higher import dependence on the fossil fuels. These are some of the objectives that are being discussed in this particular article related to green hydrogen. And what is a green hydrogen, types of hydrogen, etc. we have already discussed in the earlier videos also. Done. Let's go to the next article here. Retrospective taxation. Again, what is a retrospective tax? Why this is important? What was done by Government of India? There is a separate video on the retrospective taxation. Please have a look at it. I'll just give an update here. What is the update here? Government of India has proposed, right, withdrawing the clauses with respect to retrospective taxation. It has stated that if there is any dispute between Government of India and a company, and the cause of dispute is a retrospective taxation provision, the provision of retrospective taxation has been withdrawn, and if there is any tax dispute, that will be settled. But Government of India imposes one restriction or one condition related to this. It says that the company, right, which is involved in the dispute here, the company has to give it, right, in the form of writing to government that neither it nor any related parties of the company in the future will not file the case and will not demand payment by the Government of India. That is a condition which has been imposed by the Government of India to settle the retrospective taxation issue. Now, the companies such as Vodafone and Cairn Energy have raised a concern with respect to this particular condition that has been imposed by the government. Their argument is very simple. When you say that I will have to give an undertaking, I will have to take the approvals of many of these particular stakeholders. For example, I will have to take the approvals from the shareholders, the directors of the company. If there is any supplier of the company, any related party of the company, I will have to take the approval from all of them, which is not possible for a global company which is operating on a global scale. Because in the future, somebody, any related party of this particular company goes into arbitration or goes to the court and files a case against Government of India, demands payment from Government of India, and if the company, that is Vodafone, has agreed, right, as per the provision of the government, then the Vodafone company will be held liable for this. Have you understand this? The argument here is Vodafone will settle the case with Indian government, and in the future any complaint filed on this particular retrospective taxation issue, Vodafone will be held liable or Cairn Energy will be held liable, and they are saying we are not ready to take this kind of a risk, because one, in the future who is going to own the company, I don't know. Tomorrow I might enter into a joint venture with any company, I might sell this company to anybody else in the market, and the new buyer might simply decide they have a very valid case here, and they might go to court and file a case. Government might simply say we have settled it, so go and ask the earlier owner. So Vodafone or Cairn Energy will become liable for the payment in such cases. And that is the reason these particular companies have asked Government of India to withdraw this particular clause. Only then they will come to negotiating table and basically settle these kinds of disputes. Done. This is update with respect to retrospective taxation issue. Now finally, with respect to PIB Vault, I have taken two important articles which have come in the last 1 week. One, Government of India has announced revised TMA, that is Transportation and Marketing Assistance, right, TMA. This was announced, as already mentioned, this was announced for the financial year 20. Initially it was announced only for 1 year. Later it was extended by 1 more year for financial year 21. Now this was announced for financial year 21 also, and it was withdrawn. Government of India has announced a revised TMA scheme now. And understand this, I am using the term revised, not simply extended like this, for a simple reason. One, what was the assistance that was provided has been increased, right? After revision, what has been changed? One, the assistance has been changed. Earlier, whatever was the assistance, you don't have to mug up the assistance here. Whatever was the assistance via, let's say, the port, right, the port transportation, the assistance through port transportation has been increased by 50%. And in case of air transportation, the assistance provided by the government under the new scheme has been increased by 100%. And the assistance provided by government through port transportation, through air transportation will vary from one country to another country and will vary from air as well as the port as such. You don't have to mug up that particular list. Simply remember, after revision, assistance has been increased. First point. Second, earlier the dairy products were not covered under this particular scheme. Right, we covered only some of these agriculture commodities. Agriculture exports were covered. Now the coverage has been extended even to dairy products. Okay, that is the second very important change that has been done by the government under the revised TMA. That is one point. Second, maybe digital. It is a program which has been launched by the government. To be more precise, this has been launched by Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and Ministry of Electronics. Under this, we are going to identify certain street vendors. We are going to identify certain street vendors and we are going to train them with respect to utilizing digital modes of payment, acceptance as well as making digital modes of payment. For example, we will help them to use UPI codes, we will help them to use QR codes, etc. And for this particular purpose, in this particular drive or program, in addition to Ministry of the Housing as well as Ministry of Electronics here, Paytm company is participating, PhonePe is participating, BharatPay is also participating. And these particular companies will be training these particular street vendors and will be helping them in utilizing these particular modes of payment, and they will also be allocating QR codes to them, UPI IDs to these particular street vendors. And remember this particular Maybe Digital is a part or it is an initiative under PM Swanidhi scheme. PM Swanidhi scheme, and this particular scheme was launched by government in the year 2020, under which we targeted street vendors. That is the name Swanidhi. Street vendors Atmanirbhar Nidhi. Is it okay? I will repeat, it is an acronym here. Street vendors Atmanirbhar Nidhi. Under this, objective was to cover 50 lakh street vendors and provide them collateral free working capital loans up to 10,000 rupees. Is it okay? 50 lakh street vendors would be identified and will be providing collateral free, right, and with interest subvention loans, that is a working capital loans up to 10,000 rupees. And if the street vendor takes it and makes a prompt repayment, in the second tranche it will be increased to 30,000 and further to 50,000 also. So this kind of a scheme has been launched by Government of India under Swanidhi. And remember, SIDBI is the nodal agency. SIDBI is the nodal implementation authority for Swanidhi scheme. Done. So these are some of the points with respect to the important concepts which were covered under the PIB. Now based on this, I have given you two questions. Question number 1, consider the following statements regarding TMA. Introduced by Ministry of Finance, wrong, Ministry of Commerce. It has been introduced by Ministry of Commerce. Second, all exports have been identified under this, wrong. some of the agriculture exports, now even the dairy products have been identified under this particular scheme. So, option for this will be option D, neither 1 nor 2. Next question, consider the following regarding Swanidhi scheme. It is aimed at reducing the distress in the MSME sector. Wrong, it is focused or targeted at street vendors. It is a central sector scheme. Statement is true, it is a central sector scheme. Scheme facilitates affordable working capital availability for the identified beneficiaries. Yes, second statement and third statement are true. Right option will be option C, 2 and 3. So, these are the various articles as well as the questions related to these particular articles for this particular time period. Before I wind up, if you like the initiative, please hit the like button and provide valuable inputs in the comment section below. And also do not forget to subscribe to BYJU'S IAS channel and recommend our channel to your fellow students or fellow the friends who are preparing for the UPSC exams. Thank you. Have a good day.